Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Delaget's monthly webinar series. This month's webinar is presented in partnership with Restaurant Solutions Incorporated and is entitled 4 Reasons Why You Should Outsource Your Payroll and Accounting. On behalf of Delaget, I want to thank everyone listening in today. My name is Mary Krauss, and I'm the Solutions Consultant at Delaget. I will be your host today. Let's begin with a couple of housekeeping items. At the end of the webinar today, you'll be receiving an email with a recorded copy of today's webinar. As well as at the end of the webinar, we're going to ask you to take a brief survey, very short survey, to give us your feedback and tell us what you thought about today's webinar. Now I'd like to introduce our panel for today's discussion. As I mentioned, my name is Mary Krauss, and I'm the Solutions Consultant at Delaget. I have many roles here at Delaget, but mainly my role is to provide training resource for our team. I assist clients in best practice use of Delaget tools, as well as I have over 30 years in the restaurant QSR industry. Dave.
Thanks, Mary. Good morning, everybody. My name is Dave Downs, and I'm a client advisor with RSI, with Restaurant Solutions. I also am a former multi-unit restaurant operator. I have been with RSI for about 5 years, and our client advisory department really exists to help take a really deep CFO or COO level engagement into our clients and help them make sure that they're strategically set up for growth and be able to sustain that growth over a long period of time. With us also from RSI is Michele O'Neill, and I'll let her introduce herself here in a moment. Michele?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Dave. Very similar biography for me. Dave and I have both been at Restaurant Solutions for 5 years and have multi-unit owner-operator experience. We're very excited to be on this panel today, especially as we're seeing more multi-unit emerging and the quick service market as well. So looking forward to getting into it, Mary.
Thanks, Michele. Thanks, Dave. Good to have you all on today. During our time together this morning, we will be reviewing 4 reasons why you should outsource your payroll and accounting. We all know that managing payroll and accounting takes time. And as your organization begins to grow, that time can take away from other activities. Sometimes you're going to get dragged into daily administrative tasks instead of focusing in on customers and or employees. We also know that hiring and maintaining staff can be time-consuming. Dave, let's discuss how outsourcing payroll and accounting can help an organization save time.
Or myriad ways that outsourcing these functions can help an operator save a lot of time. First and foremost, one of the main things that we see is being able to alleviate or maybe minimize some of the payroll administration right out of the gate. A lot of that comes through technological developments and being able to utilize and leverage technology. In addition to that, we're really trying to defragment some of the systems, being able to streamline the operators' reporting functionality, their accounts payable, their payroll, all funneling into one location to help streamline and save some time there. One of the most important ways that happens is trying to avoid the duplication of efforts. In terms of invoicing, as an example, minimizing how many times those invoices are touched before they're into the accounting system so that the operators can really take advantage of looking at information as timely as possible. And one of the last but not least reasons is certainly in terms of being able to save time with reconciling both sales and the bank accounts at the end of the period. Michele, as we're kind of talking through some of those various areas where the operators can save some time, what do you identify as some of the opportunity costs that operators can identify or can have in being able to take advantage of freeing up some time?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's certain things that are quantifiable and certain things that aren't. And time can absolutely have an impact on having operators not be engaged in revenue-producing activities. So having to manually enter things like invoices or particularly payroll is a chore. And we would much prefer to have the integration through technology that both Delaget and RSI have to pre-populate those hours and make it more of a review, spend time looking at a review. And that can be very quantifiable when you take the time to manage time card maintenance, look at clock-ins, clock-outs, and ensure that your payroll is submitted correctly, then you can quantify saving money on things like overtime or potentially even things like making a mistake that would have a tax impact.
Cool, and not even less important is the impact on the overall guest experience. Being able to make sure that guest experience is the tantamount to the operator's mindset. Being able to provide that great guest experience in a timely fashion. What are some other kinds of time savings an operator may be able to enjoy by having that outsourced payroll or accounting system, Michele?
Well, the analytics are important, and I think most of the owners and operators that we talk to, looking at systems and administration, one of the biggest concerns is I don't want to turn a manager into an administrator. I don't want them spending too much time in the office, which definitely is not revenue producing, or having to, do a lot of manual work to get the kind of data and analytics I need. So having things that integrate and populate for them means that they can spend more time with the guests, just as you said, Dave. Like it's more important that you have operators who are engaged in the business than setting up the analytics to support reports on the business.
No doubt.
Well, that's great insight. And Michele, I think too, we always need to come back to the reason that most people get into becoming an owner-operator is because they love being around people. They like serving guests. They love being out in the field. And so as one outsources because of growth, that gives the operator the opportunity to stay in what they really love to do, being around people.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mary. And also when you have another layer of administration, whether that's a controller, a CFO, or an owner, there's a lot to be said for time saving when you outsource to a third party who can have an operator validate and verify information. That cuts a lot of time in terms of, well, I see the information that's come across. I see a financial statement, but now I have to spend some time validating it and making sure that the information behind it is correct. So outsourcing can be time saving in that regard as well.
Awesome. Great insights, you guys. So let's go ahead and let's move on. So one thing to be thinking through is the cycle of business. So as your business begins to grow and you start growing your unit, the overhead cost to do business grows at the same rate. There are more and more complexities that end up getting added in, which can look like additional staff, additional technologies, and even internal system changes. So there are more and more complexities that get added in as your business begins to grow. You end up having less time as processes begin to take longer with the addition of more locations. Additional units is great, and that's what we're all striving for as you go into business, but the process just becomes more complex and becomes less manageable internally. Let's go ahead and talk about how outsourcing can help an operator increase their profits. Michele, would you like to kick this one off?
Yeah, for sure, Mary. So again, it's going to come back to giving operators easier ways to manage administrative tasks and accounting tasks, spend more time actually reviewing those analytics, and more time, of course, engaging with guests and increasing profitability and guest experience overall. In terms of how operators can limit profitability, if you have more revenue producing or less revenue producing activities that are tying up your managers, of course, that's a downside. If you have one person who's overseeing all of your operations from payroll to accounts payable and inventory, there's less likelihood that they're actually going to be able to manage all of the details of your business, especially where compliance is related.
Dave, anything additionally that you would add? Any insights that you have?
I always like to, when we're talking about increasing profits, is really kind of twofold in my mind. First and foremost, trying to reduce some of maybe the corporate overhead and make the operation as a whole bigger, or the corporation as a whole much more profitable. Secondly, it kind of comes back to a little bit more time savings too, is being able to expedite the data collection and be able to get it into the accounting system as quickly as possible so that the organization can remain nimble, so it can really be able to stay as lean as possible above the store level.
And I'm going to share just some insights from my past experience in the QSR industry. I actually started with a company that was very small when I first started, and our business grew over the 27 years that I was involved in it. We grew from 5 to 21 locations. And we actually, had a very small group of people working on these tasks in the beginning. And as we grew, what we found was that we began to take our eyes off the operations, which is what really drives the sales, which drives the profits. So, as an operator can free up their time by outsourcing, it really gives them the ability to keep focused on what's important to them and what they know how to do best, which is the operations and running great operations and developing great teams.
It's a great point.
Agreed, Mary. That's a good point. Yeah, no, sorry, Dave. I was just going to add on that. It's really important, too, to consider that the analytics that we produce, part of RSI's core philosophy is the education behind them. So what we like to talk about a lot is being more impressed with those who can impact a P&L than those who can read or analyze one. So it's part of our philosophy to make sure the operators know what their goals are and then also have metrics to be able to measure their performance. And that's part of the service and education that comes behind the analytics that RSI and Delaget would produce for clients.
So we all know that employee turnover is painful. We experience that just as single or small unit operators. And typically, what I found, and based on my past experience, the administrative duties of smaller organizations is usually assigned to family members or close friends. As growth begins to occur, the one or two people with all the knowledge become overwhelmed and may begin to experience more personal time being infringed upon due to the increased workload to produce for the growing unit. So workload increases, so the pressure to produce may come to a head, which results in turnover. So when the turnover at this level happens, it can be really painful because the one or two people, they were the glue that held the payroll and accounting team together. And now, with that element missing, legal deadlines might be missed, taxes may not get filed properly, payroll withholdings may get overlooked. Dave, can you share with us how outsourcing can help with this?
Absolutely. A few things that we really kind of try and absorb and be able to take in the outsourcing part of the payroll and the accounting within RSI is to not rely on a single in-house resource to be the jack of all trades, to be extremely knowledgeable on accounting and being able to verify everything is getting in there, reconcile the bank accounts, be a compliance director and make sure that you're doing everything, dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's, so to speak. Being able to eliminate that need for one person or even a small group of people within your organization to be that jack of all trades. Being able to rely and outsource, it gives you that improved stability. You have that expertise that you can rely on and be able to bounce ideas off of and ask questions to, become a resource. The risk of having one person being in that role is, number one, they are expected to be the expert in everything, and that just doesn't typically happen in a small organization. Even a restaurant group of 8 to 10 quick service restaurants probably would not have more than one, possibly one and a part-time administrative person in that role, being able to serve all of those needs. Secondarily, from an exposure perspective, we had a really good, about a year ago, a case study from a restaurant group in Chicago that had 2 restaurants. The bookkeeper was doing the bank reconciliation and cutting the checks, and she fleeced these 2 restaurants to the tune of about $600,000 over a couple years. And as she was getting arrested from the restaurant, simply said, please, in the future, don't ever have the person who's cutting the checks be the same person who's reconciling your bank account. So she acknowledged right away that self-governance can absolutely be an issue. And I don't mean to say that everyone out there is nefarious in doing negative things, but certainly an interesting case study. So being able to rely on that other group of experts and be able to view that as a partnership is really important. Michele, would you agree?
Yeah, and the partnership takeaway is massive because we're talking about a partnership between an accounting company and in-house administration and, of course, the business owners and operators themselves. So it becomes a system of checks and balances. We want to do a verification. Every restaurant should have a verification on work that is submitted, especially where compliance is involved. And unfortunately, as Dave mentioned, we have seen some fraud come across. But on a lower level of that, if you have one guy or one gal, one person who's kind of overseeing everything, you have to consider what would happen to your business if that person left. Back to the original point of turnover. Who's going to take over those responsibilities? Who's managing those systems? So when we're talking about exposure, we don't necessarily mean that in a negative way. It's just exposing your work, your administrative load, your processes into a more single and streamlined platform so that you have oversight from the third party and you're free to spend more time on the actual operations and less time on administration. Fraud protection, of course, comes into play as well.
Another major benefit or a couple other major benefits that I see for the operators, they get a little bit of that peace of mind, that they have that partner that they can rely on and as I mentioned earlier, bounce ideas off of or get feedback on certain things, make sure that they're compliant. But also, across the organization, everything is really pretty much streamlined. Everyone's kind of speaking that same language. And to your point, Michele, that you made a moment ago about RSI really focusing on that training and education piece of getting the organization up to speed and being able to speak that same language across all the units for whichever areas they're in direct control over really is important. That partnership allows that visibility from an ownership perspective and gives you a little bit more of that peace of mind. So.
Yeah, and especially if there's administrative control level and then it comes down to GM level, who is the resource that you have to say, what can I do about my food cost? How can I improve my labor? What do these comp codes mean? So having a dedicated team outside of your operation who can give you, an outside view perspective on your performance and some real measurements and tactics on how to succeed is important. Sometimes you don't have those answers internally.
That's great. So am I hearing you say that you really also work on helping train teams in terms of how they can impact the P&L?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's core to our philosophy. The service that we provide really comes in the training and education side. We, again, back to the P&L, it's important to produce financial statements in a timely fashion. Weekly is best. But moreover, we want to make sure that everybody who has a hand in impacting them also has good strategies on what to do with that information, what it means, where it's derived from, and most importantly, what can be done with it to improve profitability. So the service and education piece is core to RSI.
That's really great. That's really great, especially with how there's just such issues now with staffing and really having time in your day. I think that's just great that you're an extension of the partners that you work with and the clients that you're serving. So that's super.
Thanks, Mary.
So as we head into our last reason here, one thing to think about is that as unit size increases, reporting tends to take longer. There's really only so many hours in a day that people can get work done. So if you're not outsourcing and you're doing everything internal, the more locations you have, there's still only so much work in the single day that can be produced. A result of this can be late financials, which can really impact the decision making. And that decision-making can be slowed down, which isn't providing operators and owners insights into their financial positions. So, Michele, can you talk to how, by outsourcing, this can improve financial visibility?
Yeah, for sure. And in the timeliness, it's very important that we're talking about having a regular schedule, weekly as best of financial statements, and actually customizing the layout of your financial statements so that you're offering visibility appropriately by access level. It's absolutely a challenge, especially as restaurants grow, on maintaining an access level that supports perhaps divisions Or with bigger groups, I just want a director of ops to look at their concept or their area or their division or however they look at it. So having some flexibility in your accounting system to produce accurate and timely financial statements as appropriate to access, and then of course educating those by access on what they need to understand about those financial statements is important.
To kind of piggyback on that a little bit, Michelle, I really bring this back to those area coaches. And Mary, I know that's kind of something that was in your past too as a multi-unit operator. Being able to give the area coaches their subset of restaurants and either stack them up side by side, or if they're working with the budget, being able to look at budget versus actual and really continue to develop their team and continue to be able to coach and develop the rest of those management teams at each of the stores, because each store is going to have a different subset of challenges. Labor has been an issue coast to coast for a while now, really being able to maintain staffing levels and keep those there. But that may not be the same for each of those restaurants. Maybe someone else is really struggling with food costing or ordering appropriately or those kinds of things. So there's different goals. Being able to see those statements side by side in one system in a timely fashion allows those area coaches to make really good decisions and continue to develop their team.
Yeah, and Dave, tying it back in terms of visibility and turnover, it's important to remember that I think another little bit of pushback we get sometimes from owners particularly is in the QSR market or in a market where you have a lot of managers and not a lot of oversight over them, are my leaders actually able to understand what they're looking at? Is this something that they're going to want to do in a quick service environment? Are they going to want to look at P&Ls and understand them? And what we have found, and I actually had a testament to in one of the Restaurant Solutions digital panels that we did, is turnover reduces when you align your leadership and provide them goals for growth. It's very important that you don't turn the leaders of your business into shift runners. You want them to run your business, not just a shift. So if the thought is, well, it's too much information with them, they're not going to need that much information or know what to do with it, you're also providing an investment in an education within your staff.
And having that consistent messaging as it's addressed through the training and education with RSI, having that consistent messaging really allows the team to be speaking the same language and probably allows those area coaches to identify who their strongest leaders are and continue to develop the rest of those teams as well.
Yeah, every employee wants to feel like they're part of something bigger, that they can grow in an organization, and financial knowledge is something that people can translate throughout their career trajectory. There's a lot of people who make a career of restaurants. Right, Dave?
No doubt.
Right. I really love that analogy. People, when they have a greater sense of purpose, when they come into work, they tend to perform at a higher level, right? I always taught my folks that, as Michelle, you said, are you teaching them to be a shift runner or are you teaching them to be a general manager? So we always talked about the general manager role and how that impacts what they do every day. But when they come to work, they have a different step about them, right? They have a different way that they walk. They have a different way that they talk. But if all they're going to be is a shift runner, then that's what they come in with the mentality to do. And I'm just going to be a shift runner today. So they don't think about the global picture, which is really what themselves and the entire team does in running that business for the owner. So I love that. Great.
Yeah, it really kind of distills that down into one word, Mary. Having a purpose, being able to show up and feel like they're part of something bigger is great. And even developing not just GMs but true leaders, being able to create your organization in a leadership mentality and continue to develop the rest of the team. You'll be surprised when everyone's kind of speaking the same language. You'll understand how quickly people can develop into new roles or maybe even create one within the organization.
Yeah, and up for the challenge. Purpose reduces turnover is the bottom line.
Agree. Great. Well, thanks so much to our panelists. We had great talking points, great information shared. So thanks again for joining today. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks, Mary. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.